This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 617, entitled, "Learn some masculism, you ignorant, monoconscious, misandrist, feminazi cunt." Description. This flyer explains why masculists have such a hatred of monoconscious feminazis, spelling out the many gender crimes that these women commit against men, especially in the divorce courts, their manslavery as fluffies, their forced fathering, etc. Masculists see monoconscious feminists as arch hypocrites and bigots and spit in their face, haranguing them with vicious, hateful, masculist rhetoric, so that such women quickly learn to become biconscious, or they will lose their currently monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, who are specifically targeted by the biconscious masculists, who teach them masculism, so that once biconscioused, these boyfriends then become disgusted with the monoconscious bigotry of their feminist girlfriends and then dump them in their millions. Soon, monoconscious feminists will be so universally hated that they will soon die out. The flyer itself. Learn some masculism, you ignorant, monoconscious, misandrist, feminazi cunt. By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Masculists have a hatred of monoconscious feminists and give them such labels as MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, misandrist feminazi cunts, and the like. Why do masculists have such a hatred of such women? There are many reasons. Probably the worst is that these women have become indirect genociders, wiping out whole populations, since they took over the divorce courts in the 70s, converting them to family courts, and then proceeded to butcher the lives of one father in 4, making divorce so toxic for men that now in many countries 2/3 of young men simply refuse to marry, reject paternity, and spend their money on themselves. That is, they have chosen to live the MGTOW, MGTOW, men going their own way, lifestyle, and thus crash the birth rate. Recently, a shocking statistic was released that in the US, that now 60% of young men under 30 not only reject marriage and paternity, but they, in capital letters, don't even date. That is, they have gone MGTOW monk. They have become so pissed off with women that they want nothing to do with them, totally ignoring them. So of course young women now are getting really depressed as they notice that at work men no longer foster them, being only professionally polite to them, but offer no emotional warmth nor professional support to women. Masculists argue that the root cause of the MGTOW rejection of marriage and paternity is the toxicity of the divorce courts, where one father in 4 is butchered by the hated fluffy feminists who control them, who, as divorce court lawyers and judges, know nothing about masculism, hence are, by definition, monoconscious, not biconscious, since they are ignorant of masculist ideas. They believe what feminism tells them, that is, that gender oppression is a one-way street, that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed. Of course, to masculists, this monoconsciousness on the part of the feminists causes real anger and hatred in them, who see these monoconscious feminists as ignorant, in brackets, of masculist ideas, that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, that women in fact oppress men far worse. More on this later. Close brackets. As monoconscious, as misandrist, since feminism is a deeply misandrist, genocentric ideology that preaches to women that gender oppression is a one-way street. So not surprisingly, women, most women, have now been influenced by feminist ideas. monoconscious feminist ideas, so have become hostile to men, seeing men as oppressors of women. So these monoconscious feminist women feel they have every right to be misandrist towards men, since they see men as the oppressors of women who should be fought against. So it's not a surprise that on campus, for example, most female students are rather hostile towards men, especially when men display attitudes that feminism preaches to women as being male chauvinist or being toxically masculine, etc. But Masculists know better. Masculists know that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, and that women oppress men, and in fact worse than vice versa, since many of women's gender crimes against men are truly horrible, in capitals, and last decades, capitals. The worst three being women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, and women's forced fathering. When one examines any one of these three, one sees just how horrible they are, and one has one's masculist consciousness raised, becoming at first angry at gender criminal women, and later becoming full of hatred at such gender criminal women who commit truly horrible gender crimes against men. For example, try to imagine the level of callousness and criminality of a woman who commits paternity fraud. That is, she lies to her husband that the kid growing in her is his when she knows it's not. Roughly 10% of pregnancies involve paternity fraud. This utter shit of a woman then manslaves a man for 2 decades to pay for a kid that, in capital letters, is not even his. Take the case of a young fluffy woman who by definition does not bother to FIP up, in brackets FIP, F-I-P, equals financially independent person, who does not get a career competent education at high school and college, so becomes a real fluffy as an adult, who then realizes in her 30s, when her biological clock really starts ticking, that she can't afford to pay for her own middle-class house that she wants to raise her kids in. So goes looking around for some gullible, ignorant, in brackets, of MGTOW and Masculists ideas, close bracket, manslavable man to work for her for decades so she can raise her kids in a middle-class house that he pays for. Typically, such a fluffy, under the influence of feminism, will have had dozens of penises in her by the time she is 30, so will have destroyed her ability to strongly emotionally bond with her husband, her 31st penis. So after a decade of marriage, with her 2 kids and her house given to her, she gets bored with him, and in 80%, in brackets 90% for university graduate women, close brackets, of divorces, she will be the one to initiate it. She then drags her husband to a fluffy feminist-controlled divorce court and has him butchered, losing custody of his kids to her with a 90% probability, losing his house to her so she can raise her kids in it, be forced to pay her half of his wealth, half his stuff, made to pay child support to his kids, whom he will barely be allowed to see, maybe 2 weekends a month. And if his divorcing ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may be forced to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, so that she continues to parasite off his money after the divorce the way she did before the divorce. This fluffy feminist butchery of men in the divorce courts is so hated by Masculists that the Masculists talk of a gender war, where in the limit, Masculist soldiers will go out into the streets and simply shoot monoconscious feminazis who are so hated by the Masculists that such women are seen as vermin to be eliminated. Why do the Masculists have such a hatred of these gender criminal women? Because they are indirect genociders. They have made divorce so toxic for men that, as said above, now 2/3 of young men reject marriage and paternity because they absolutely refuse to face a 1 in 4 chance of being butchered in a hated, fluffy, feminist dominated divorce court. So when a biconscious masculist, who knows all the masculist arguments above, is confronted with a typically monoconscious feminist, his blood boils. He sees a real red flag. He gets his back up. His adrenaline starts pumping hard because he sees such a monoconscious feminist as the enemy, someone to be truly hated, because due to his masculist knowledge, he knows that this woman is truly an ignorant, monoconscious, misandrist, feminazi cunt, whom he spits into her face, hurling vitriolic, poisonous, hateful abuse at her for a string of reasons. Firstly, this monoconscious feminist is ignorant of masculist ideas, since by definition she is monoconscious. Therefore, she does not have her feminazi bigotry at men for the ways that men oppress women cancelled by a corresponding and oppositely directed hatred at women for the ways that women oppress men, and in fact worse, for the reasons given above, namely the much greater degree of gender criminality towards men by women than vice versa. He hates her misandry as a man because she is piling verbal shit onto men, because she is a monoconscious feminist who feels, in capital letters, fully justified in hurling this misandrous shit at men because she really feels it. This is what feminism has taught her, giving her the evidence, the history of men's abuse of women. Biconscious masculists don't deny that men have oppressed women. Biconscious masculists can read feminist books as readily as can feminists, so don't deny what the feminists are saying about men's oppression of women. But masculisted men do deny, in capital letters, the claim of the feminists that gender oppression is a one-way street. To masculists, who concentrate on how women oppress men, find the monoconscious idea of the feminists that gender oppression is a one-way street laughable and viciously attack it. Typically, when a biconscious masculist is confronted with a truly monoconscious feminist, sparks fly. It's usually a very unpleasant experience for a monoconscious feminist to be confronted for the first time in her life by a verbally vicious, hateful, biconscious masculist who does not tolerate her monoconsciousness and chews her out viciously, hatefully, even spitting in her face, yelling at her how women are far greater oppressors of men than vice versa, and telling her that her monoconscious feminist beliefs are the root cause of the current genocide of humanity, as 2/3 of young men now reject marriage and paternity, utterly rejecting the 1 in 4 chance of being butchered in the hated, fluffy, feminist-controlled divorce court system. These young men are saying to themselves, and increasingly to young women, quote, "Fuck marriage. Fuck paternity. I'm not facing a 1 in 4 chance of being butchered in a fluffy feminist controlled divorce court. I'll live the MGTOW, MGTOW, men going their own way, lifestyle. And you women can rot on the shelf. I'll pump and dump you, but I certainly won't help pay for you to have kids, since you will divorce me with 1 chance in 2. And divorce rape me with 1 chance in 4. So fuck you, female. Go rot on the shelf." End quote. Masculists are pushing for the creation of a FIP society, where both sexes are socialised and educated to be FIPs, so that the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce court system is reformed out of existence, so that women are expected to be FIPs, so that alimony is thrown out, so that halving of wealth and stuff is rejected, where the divorcing mother is expected to be a FIP, so that the principle of financial independence of both divorcing parties is taken for granted. Masculists push for the creation of GECs, GECs, Gender Equality Committees, in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are treated equally, which is far from being the case today, which pisses off the masculists profoundly, hence the great anger and hatred of the masculists in face of these massive gender injustices committed by women and society against men. When we biconscious masculists, who are well educated in all the above, are confronted with monoconscious feminists, it's no wonder that we explode in anger and hatred at them, telling them to, quote, Learn some masculism, you hated, ignorant, monoconscious, misandrist, feminazi cunt! Exclamation mark, end quote. Masculists expect monoconscious feminists to convert themselves into becoming biconscious, or else they become more likely to lose their boyfriends, their currently monoconscious male feminist boyfriends. We masculists target, capital letters, these male feminist boyfriends and teach them masculism, which makes them biconscious by definition. These now biconscious boyfriends then look at the monoconsciousness of their feminist girlfriends, become disgusted at the hypocrisy and bigotry of these monoconscious feminist girlfriends, and then dump them. It's very much in the self-interest of monoconscious feminists to become biconscious, or they risk losing their biconscious boyfriends, whom we masculists actively target. The masculists aim for the biconsciousing of society, teaching society of masculist ideas, so that the feminists lose their ignorant monoconscious bigotry and learn that gender oppression is a two-way street, that women oppress men, and far worse, with their many horrible, decades-lasting gender crimes against men. Masculists can't stomach the two-faced hypocrisy and bigotry of feminazis, hence label them MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, and spit in their faces, not only totally ignoring them, but not even pumping and dumping them, thus forcing such MFBs to rot on the shelf, dying a slow, miserable death, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and totally ignored, both socially and sexually, utterly rejected, causing her monoconscious, fluffy, manslaving, divorce-raping, misandrist, feminazi bitch genes to be removed from the gene pool, totally hated, to be wiped off the face of the earth. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 610 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.